Stranded knitting is more than just pretty patterns, it's cultural storytelling through yarn. In this video, we're going to explore the history of colourwork in knitting, from the remote Scottish Islands to the icy peaks of Norway, and the rich traditions of the Baltic states. We'll also look at how techniques like Intarsia and the use of charts revolutionised how we approach multicoloured designs. Fair Isle knitting comes from the Shetland Islands, particularly Fair Isle itself, a small island that has been inhabited for 6,000 years, throughout the Bronze and Iron Ages along with Vikings and other Norse settlements. Apologies if you can hear the chicken. The population dwindled due to poor fishing and crofting seasons in the mid-1800s. People emigrated to pastures new in exotic lands like Canada. Around 60 people remain there today. It uses stranded colourwork to create repetitive, symmetrical motifs. Traditionally, only 2 colours are used per row, and the motifs are geometric and small to avoid long floats. Common shapes are crosses and hexagons, along with symbols related to daily life for the Fair Islanders, like flowers and ram's horns. The origins of Fair Isle are debated, with some stories saying that survivors of a Spanish shipwreck in 1588 taught stranded colourwork to the locals as a thank you for their hospitality. But others debate that it was much later than this, as no stranded colourwork was done in Spain at this time. It's generally agreed that this style of knitting started around mid-19th century, when ships from Baltic regions were trading with Scotland, and the style was adopted to suit the region. The earliest verified examples are from the early 19th century, predominantly in caps worn by fishermen. These were bartered for goods like food, alcohol, and household items. With the growth of tourism, the style spread and became desired by many. In 1954, the island was bought by the National Trust to help preserve the island's heritage. This technique became globally famous in the 1920s when Edward, the Prince of Wales, wore Fair Isle jumpers, turning regional craft into mainstream fashion. In theory, a genuine Fair Isle fabric must originate from the island itself, using Shetland wool, making the carbon footprint very small. They use a mixture of hand and machine to produce garments made to order to customers worldwide. Of course, anyone can take inspiration from the patterns to make themselves, and general fashion incorporates Fair Isle-inspired patterns in clothing everywhere you look. It's feeling a bit like Fair Isle out here at the minute. I'm going inside. Norwegian colourwork also uses stranded knitting, and with its own distinct motifs. Like Fair Isle knitting, Norwegian styles incorporate motifs and symbols they would see in daily life, but for them it would be things like snowflakes, animals like reindeer and horses, flowers, hearts, and many more. This well-known and distinctive pattern has origins in a remote town called Selbu. A mitten made by Marit Emstad in the 1850s sparked a national tradition. She made the mittens herself and wore them to church. The particular 8-pointed star she used in her design is found in older books all over Europe, and some simpler versions can be traced back to Egyptian, Islamic and Native American cultures. While not a brand new design, it was incorporated into the back of each mitten with contrasting colours, creating a striking result. They proved popular, and everyone wanted a pair. The first Selberos mitten was delivered to a local craft shop by Emstad herself in 1897, and within 30 years, local knitters were producing 100,000 plus pairs a year, selling them throughout Europe and the world. This allowed the female population of the region to become more financially independent and supplement their household incomes. The statement pieces are a staple in local shops to this day. Around this time, there was also a wedding tradition where the bride would knit a pair of mittens or stockings for her soon-to-be husband. Female guests would also each knit a pair of mittens. They were displayed in a bridal loft, and the bride would match each pair to a male guest. This was a chance for the women to show off their skill and imagination with elaborate colourwork. The distinctive design also gave a sense of national pride and identity to Norway. Once ruled jointly with Denmark, and after a war with Sweden in 1814, they gained some independence. They now had their own constitution, judiciary and legal system. Along with Norse fairy tales and folk songs, the distinctive mitten gave them a strong national style to differentiate themselves from their Nordic neighbours. In the Baltics, particularly Latvia and Estonia, colourwork is rich in symbolism, often passed down through folk motifs and mitten exchanges. These designs are not just aesthetic, they're deeply tied to identity, seasons and even superstitions. Some very common ones are the sign of Mara, associated with the goddess Mara, the mother of the land, a protector of women, and it symbolises love, fire, femininity and well-being. There is also the Laima, symbolising luck, fate and good fortune. This is the symbol of the goddess of fate, fortune and destiny. There is the Oseklis, an 8-pointed star, seen as a symbol of light and victory over darkness, while giving protection from evil. Some suggest that Fair Isle knitting was derived from Latvian and Lithuanian influences, with similarities in repeating patterns and colour styles, with some patterns being found in Riga in the 16th century, showing a 4-colour design for a mitten and a sock with distinct rows of repeating symbols. Mittens were more than just clothing. In Estonian traditions, an exchange of mittens would signify an acceptance of a marriage proposal and as ceremonial gifts. Different regions had their own staples. Muhu pink, for example, coming from Muhu Island, a striking pink that can be recognised at a glance, normally intertwined with delicate and extravagant embroidery. A story of note that I want to add in here is that of Jette Eugene, born in the Vidzeme countryside of Latvia in 1924. By the age of 4, she was diagnosed with spinal tuberculosis, causing her spine to soften and collapse. The disease progressed, and by 11 she couldn't move anything but her fingers. She was confined to a wheelchair, but her mother, not wanting her to sit idle, taught her how to cast on and turn a heel, complaining that the other children had bare feet and that she was still able to work. Jette took to the craft quickly, making mostly socks and mittens. After some practice, she was able to make a pair in a day, as well as being able to mend clothes for her family. A Latvian custom is for young women to prepare a dowry chest containing knitted items. In 1940, at 16 years old, Jette was tasked with making dozens of pairs of mittens for one of the farm's serving girls. The fiancé was a wool dyer, and he provided Jette with a chest full of dyed wools for her to use. Jette says that this put her in 7th heaven. By the time the Second World War had come and gone, Jette's mittens had reached far and wide, being exhibited in Riga and Moscow. In 1960, she was awarded a Soviet honour of the Master of People's Handicrafts. Over time, as her family passed away, Jette became secluded in her farmstead, but remained independent despite her limited mobility. She used this time to experiment with colour and pattern, producing many mittens containing works of art, stories and religious motifs, not shying away from public life by doing radio and television interviews. In 1995, she received Latvia's highest civil honour, the Order of the Three Stars. She passed in 2007, and in her lifetime she knitted thousands of pairs of mittens. Jette put her own stamp on a national tradition. Her works are still celebrated in exhibitions to this day, and she is known as the Mitten Magician and Latvia's favourite knitter. You wouldn't be able to talk about traditional colourwork without mentioning Iceland. With knitting arriving in Iceland in the 16th century, the most recognisable style is the lopapeysa. With a circular yoke design and patterns draped over the wearer's shoulders, inspiration comes from the Icelandic landscapes and tradition. Generally, they use a lot of snowflakes and mountains. The yarn used is a lopi yarn. This is unspun and from Icelandic sheep. They have a soft insulating undercoat and a coarse but water-resistant outer coat. This blend gives a warm but breathable fabric, ideal for the harsh Icelandic weather. Originally designed for fishermen and farmers, they've become a symbol of Icelandic heritage and have now become a cultural icon. There is speculation as to where the inspiration from this style originated. It could be from Greenland, Aztec, Navajo, South American or Turkish patterns. After their separation from Denmark in 1944, the lopapeysa became a symbol of national identity. Over time, the style has been adapted to suit modern tastes by adding zips, buttons and new motifs, but the design still remains distinctly Icelandic. This one I'm wearing here is inspired by Icelandic styles, and I love making these ones because they're all done continuously in the round, and they're quite a nice one just to churn through. Unlike stranded knitting, Intarsia uses separate lengths of yarn for each colour area. There are no floats, just blocks of colour. First used as a term for woodworking dating from the 7th century, where you would inlay different colours of wood together to create patterns, pictures and symbols. Intarsia knitting was used sporadically through the 16th century onwards. It was popularised in the 20th century for pictorial and geometric designs, especially in fashion and modern art-influenced garments, allowing knitters to incorporate logos and distinct pictures into their designs. While less traditional than stranding, Intarsia allows for large colour fields without puckering or tension issues, making it ideal for bold graphic work. The rise of printed knitting patterns in the 19th and 20th centuries changed how colourwork was shared and taught. Colour charts, which use grids to represent each stitch, became the standard for conveying complex designs. This democratised access to traditional patterns. Knitters everywhere could recreate Baltic motifs or Fair Isle bands from a magazine or from a book. It also opened the door to new experimental designs, rooted in tradition but adapted to modern taste. From the windswept Shetlands to Norwegian fjords and Baltic villages, colourwork tells a story in every stitch. Whether you're carrying floats or changing yarns, you're continuing a long tradition of expressing identity and artistry through pattern. Thanks for watching. I quite enjoyed researching this one. It's very interesting to learn the history of some of these patterns and where some of the symbols come from. I use quite a lot of them unknowingly, really, and yeah, it's been interesting to see the history behind them. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you next time.